November 1985. A cargo plane touches down in rural Honduras. The manifest says humanitarian supplies for freedom fighters. But when it takes off 3 hours later, it's carrying 400 kilograms of pure cocaine. Destination, Los Angeles. The pilot? On the CIA payroll? The cargo? Funding a secret war Congress had just banned. This isn't fiction. For 2 decades, American intelligence agencies turned drug traffickers into allies and cocaine into Cold War currency. By 1960, the CIA was running covert wars on 4 continents, arming rebels in Laos, toppling governments in Guatemala, training guerrillas in the Congo. But there was a problem. Congress controlled the budget. Every dollar had to be justified. Every operation is debated. So the agency found a workaround, a funding source that left no paper trail, required no votes, and flowed through the darkest corners of the global economy. Drug money. Opium from the Golden Triangle. Cocaine from the Andes. Billions of dollars moving through the same smuggling routes, the same pilots, the same banks, the CIA already used for weapons. The logic was cold. If drug lords were fighting communists, they were useful. And if their product destroyed American cities, that was someone else's problem. It began in the 1950s and 60s across the mountains of Southeast Asia, Laos, Burma, and Thailand, the region infamously known as the Golden Triangle. The CIA, fighting communist influence in Indochina, armed and supplied local militias and warlords who, coincidentally, were deeply involved in opium cultivation. These groups financed their armies through heroin production, and CIA-backed airlines such as Air America allegedly transported not just weapons and supplies, but opium bricks hidden among cargo. Multiple former pilots later admitted seeing sticky packages being loaded with little questioning. One former Air America pilot, interviewed decades later, described the unspoken rule. You didn't ask what was in the duffel bags. You didn't open the crates marked medical supplies. You flew the route, collected your pay, and told yourself you were serving your country. By 1970, the Golden Triangle was producing 70% of the world's heroin, and the CIA's allies controlled the supply chain. Fast forward to the 1980s. The Cold War had shifted to Central America. President Reagan's administration wanted to overthrow Nicaragua's leftist Sandinista government by supporting the rebel Contras. But when Congress passed the Boland Amendment in 1984, banning military aid to the Contras, the White House and CIA had a problem. They needed money, and they needed it off the books. Reports soon surfaced that the Contras were financing themselves through cocaine trafficking. Planes that delivered weapons from the US and Honduras to Contra bases were returning loaded with drugs, flown by pilots linked to the same clandestine network. One airline, Setco, run by Honduran trafficker Juan Mata Ballesteros, was identified as a key transport partner for both Contra supplies and cocaine shipments. These operations moved tons of cocaine into the United States, especially to Los Angeles, feeding the rise of crack cocaine. The same week, a Contra supply plane landed in Honduras. Crack vials were being sold for $5 on the streets of South Central. The connection wasn't accidental. Nicaraguan traffickers Danilo Blandon and Norwin Meneses, both with documented CIA ties, were moving cocaine through a dealer named Freeway Rick Ross, who would become the largest crack distributor in Los Angeles history. Ross alone was moving $3 million worth of cocaine per day by 1986, and according to court testimony, a portion of those profits flowed back to the Contras through Blandon's network. Journalist Gary Webb exposed this link in his explosive 1996 series, Dark Alliance. Webb documented how drug traffickers connected to the CIA-backed Contras helped trigger the crack epidemic in American inner cities, while U.S. intelligence turned a blind eye. Webb didn't just report allegations, he named names, he traced flight logs, he interviewed traffickers in prison. His series showed that CIA-backed Contras were partners with major cocaine traffickers. The agency blocked DEA agents who tried to investigate. Millions in drug profits funded weapons purchases. The response was swift and brutal. The New York Times, Washington Post, and Los Angeles Times all ran pieces attacking Webb's credibility. The CIA launched an internal review that claimed no evidence of conspiracy. Webb was reassigned to a suburban bureau covering traffic accidents. By 1997, he'd been pushed out of journalism entirely. The New York Times, Washington Post, LA Times, none issued corrections, even after the CIA's 1998 Inspector General report confirmed Webb's core findings. The agency worked with 50-plus Contra-linked drug traffickers. It blocked DEA investigations. It failed to report credible allegations for years. But by then, Webb's career was destroyed. The Iran-Contra scandal later exposed how weapons were secretly sold to Iran and proceeds funneled to the Contras. Yet the drug funding aspect was largely buried beneath political damage control. But the Contras weren't the only CIA allies funding wars with drugs. In 1979, the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan. The CIA's response? Arm the Mujahideen resistance fighters. The problem? Many of these fighters were also Afghanistan's largest opium producers. By 1984, the Afghanistan-Pakistan border region was producing 60% of America's heroin supply. Mujahideen commanders ran laboratories processing opium into heroin in territory the CIA helped them control. One DEA agent stationed in Islamabad later testified, "We couldn't investigate. Every time we got close to a major trafficker, we'd get a call from Langley saying he was an intelligence asset. Hands off." The heroin flowed into Europe and America. The profits bought Stinger missiles to shoot down Soviet helicopters. And when the Soviets finally withdrew in 1989, the CIA walked away, leaving behind a narco-state that would eventually become the Taliban's Afghanistan. The financial infrastructure connecting all these operations? The Bank of Credit and Commerce International, BCCI, a global laundering hub used by intelligence services, was caught moving drug money, arms profits, and covert funds side by side. When it collapsed in 1991, investigators found CIA accounts mixed with cartel deposits. Across all these theaters, the mechanism repeated. The CIA cultivated alliances with traffickers who could offer logistical power, territory, or money. In return, the agency looked the other way or used those funds indirectly to sustain operations Congress would never approve. Planes, contractors, and private intermediaries created deniability. Drug profits became the unofficial currency of covert wars. The consequences weren't abstract statistics. In 1985, Los Angeles had 3,000 crack-related arrests. By 1989, over 50,000. One mother in South Central, interviewed in 1990, described watching her neighborhood transform. In 1984, my son played basketball in the park. By 1987, that same park had dealers on every corner. By 1988, my son was dead, shot over $20 worth of crack. The mandatory minimum sentencing laws passed during this era sent tens of thousands to prison for decades. 5 grams of crack, minor 5 years mandatory. 500 grams of powder cocaine, same sentence. The disparity was 100 to 1, and it fell hardest on the communities where CIA-connected traffickers had flooded the market. Meanwhile, the officials who enabled the pipeline faced no charges. The government waging a war on drugs was accused of benefiting from it. Internationally, narco-states flourished. From the Golden Triangle to Colombia and Central America, drug traffickers gained military protection and political leverage. Entire governments were destabilized by the very covert alliances meant to save them from communism. Public trust in American institutions suffered deeply. The idea that the world's leading democracy might have funded wars with cocaine money-shattered faith in official narratives. The CIA admitted that it failed to report or investigate drug crimes by its assets. Congress tightened oversight, but much of the damage, both human and moral, was irreversible. Even today, the legacy lingers. Modern intelligence cooperation in Latin America and the Middle East still walks a fine line between counter-narcotics and covert geopolitics. Recent revelations show CIA involvement with specialized units in Mexico targeting cartels, echoing the old pattern of blurred missions and murky accountability. In 2004, the CIA's Inspector General released a final report on the Contra drug connection. Buried on page 361, one line stood out. CIA personnel were aware of allegations of drug trafficking involving Contra-related organizations and individuals, but failed to report or investigate. No one was prosecuted, no policy change. That same year, Gary Webb was found dead. 2 gunshot wounds to the head, ruled a suicide. His Dark Alliance series had been vindicated by the very report meant to discredit it. But vindication came 8 years too late. Today, the CIA still operates in drug-producing regions, still partners with warlords and militias. In 2020, the U.S. military was caught paying Afghan militia commanders who controlled opium routes, the same commanders moving heroin into Europe. When investigators asked why, the answer was familiar: intelligence asset. The question isn't whether it happened. Declassified documents prove it did. The question is, how much are we willing to ignore when the operations are labeled national security? And how many more Gary Webbs will be destroyed for asking? If this story revealed something the history books left out, hit subscribe, because the next investigation goes even deeper into the money trails they don't want you to follow.